Seated. This week we have two readings. We have this reading from Luke that is rather apocalyptic in nature, talks about how Jesus didn't bring peace but division, a challenging reading for us in our present time, but we can also understand that certainly there are times in our world where we see fire on our own earth. And so I'll talk just a little bit about that, but for now we're going to set aside that reading and I'm going to focus on the Hebrews reading. This reading that says, "Since then we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us set aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely to us and run with perseverance the race." As I thought about this phrase, surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, I couldn't help but think about these folks who went with us to the service center in New Windsor. This is the Brethren Service Center. We had about 24 folks who gathered together. And I just kept having this phrase, surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, run through my head. Because what happens at the Brethren Service Center is that items from all across the country come in to this one warehouse where all of the items are processed. If you look in the back, you can see all of our teenagers here who came to help us, and we have some senior citizens who came to help us. It's incredible on both ends of the spectrum. These are folks who have time, right? Once you retire, you have time. When you're young, you have time. And so these are folks who came to help with us. And then if you look down here in the foreground, you can see the hygiene kits that are being packaged up to be sent all across the world. You can see in the back there's a map there that indicated some of the places where these hygiene kits were being sent. And then what we were doing that day, some of us were inside doing quality checks on those hygiene kits, making sure that everything was properly packaged. And others of us, including Marlon here, and Jeremiah, who I think is over, where is Jeremiah here today? Jeremiah's here somewhere. Jeremiah's out helping out in the back. But so we had Marlon and Jeremiah who were taking boxes off of the truck. These boxes had been loaded onto a train, sent by train all the way to New Windsor from wherever they originated, and then were loaded off the truck on these rollers. And we were taking all of these boxes and stacking them inside. You can see there Lee Miller. And so as we stacked the boxes, again, I was thinking of this phrase of the great cloud of witnesses. This box pyramid just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger around us as Addie and others helped to unload the truck. And each box was marked with the church where the quilts had been made and how many quilts were in each box. Some boxes had 1 or 2 quilts. Some boxes had 9 or 10 or 14 quilts in the box. And the boxes were packed by individual Lutheran churches, just like our church, that made these quilts and gathered them in so that we had this huge cloud of quilts. Here's Mary Catherine, who's showing how we kind of refolded the kits to be as small as possible to save on packaging so that more kits could be sent across the world. And here's Dennis Luther there in the back, which if you want to be involved in this ministry, Dennis Luther is the man to talk to in the red there. But here he is in white, and each one of these squares that he's standing next to, believe it or not, is about 35 quilts. They have this amazing machine where you fold the quilts in a certain way to make them as small as possible, and then they put them on this machine, sucks out all of the air out of the quilts, packages them down into as small as possible, and then binds them to keep them from just exploding in the back of the truck everywhere as they're sent through the world. Look at that puffy white cloud of witnesses, of quilts, piled up, ready to be sent. Each of these says Lutheran World Relief. And here I went on the website to find out where quilts are being sent right now. And one of the stories that came up was the story of this woman who was displaced about In the current conflict that has recently ended in the past year and a half in Ethiopia, about 2 million people were displaced. I don't know all of the ins and outs of all of the inner political workings that caused that to happen, but 2 million people is about 2% of their population. The population of Ethiopia is about 102 million people. And you can imagine just how unsettling it is for a country to have 2% of their population now living in refugee camps. And they had a picture of this woman, and I can only imagine that it is comforting and also dismaying to have to receive such basic items as towels and soap to be donated to you. And here we have a picture of her wearing a very similar towel to what Marlon Strand was wearing, one of the towels that we had to reject. We couldn't accept microfiber towels, and this was a microfiber towel, and so he wore it around his neck the whole day, I guess to help keep him cool. And I could just imagine that this was just the very same towel that was being sent to this woman and to her infant, to be able to be cared for by this great cloud of witnesses, faithful women who gathered together to receive these items, but also to care for their families, to receive just a little bit of the dignity back. We see just a tiny little piece of their story here, knowing that truly they aren't just refugees, but they are Christians who are living out their faith, Muslims who are living out their faith, parents who are caring for their children and their families in so many different ways. And these small items that are sent from the great cloud of witnesses help to support them in just a little way. Since then, we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Let us run with perseverance the race that has been set before us. The race that has been set before us. That word race comes from a Greek word that can mean many different things. The Greek word is agona, from which we get our modern word agony. So it's closely related with suffering and struggle. In another place, it's translated not run the good race, but fight the good fight in 1 Timothy. It's also translated struggle, that when we run this race of faith, we are doing so not without suffering. That being a Christian doesn't mean that we won't have to face issues like this woman is facing, but what it does mean is that we have the strength that we have been given to do it not alone, but together, surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. This word race can also means not just one race, but is more closely related to our modern word of heat. I know that we have many swimming parents who are used to sitting through heat after heat after heat of their children's swimming races. And that's the kind of image that's lifted up for us today in Hebrews, that it's not just one race that we run of faith, but it's one race that connects to another race that connects to another race. The verses that we read today come from the beginning of the 12th chapter. What I've been reciting over and over again come from the beginning of the 12th chapter. But the entire 11th chapter is dedicated to these heroes of faith, Abraham and Daniel and David, who ran with perseverance the race, and then when their race was over, took the baton and handed it to the next person and handed it to the next person. That's the sort of race that we run when we commit ourselves to the Christian faith. Not that there won't be hard trials, not that there won't come difficult times, but that there will always be someone to hand the baton onto, and someone who has handed the baton to us first. As I think about this woman in Ethiopia, I was thinking about the refugee team that competed in the 2016 Olympics in Rio in Brazil. Previous to this, there had been no way for refugees to be able to compete. So there was a man named Jonas Kinde, and Jonas qualified to run when he was just 20 years old, qualified to run the marathon with a time of 2 hours and 17 minutes. But because he was an Ethiopian refugee, he had no flag to run under. So several years later, the Olympic Committee decided to allow these refugees to run not under their own flag, but under the Olympic flag. And so he ran, and being several years older, he didn't get the time that he had gotten when he was in his early 20s or in his late teens. He got a time of 2 hours and 24 minutes. And he came in 90th place. 90th. That's a rather large cloud of witnesses. But still a very impressive time, 2 hours and 24 minutes. I don't think I could run a marathon, and it would probably take me about 4 days. Let us run with perseverance the race, looking to Christ, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. We don't run on our own strength. We don't even run on the strength of the cloud of witnesses that's gathered together. But we run on the strength of one who has suffered, who has agona, who has agonized for us on the cross. Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, the word witness is a fairly simple legal term. A witness is someone who sees something happen, normally a crime, and who testifies. That's all a witness has to do. But in our Christian tradition, the word witness has come to mean not just someone who sees, but someone who has the courage to speak out, even when that speaking out may cause suffering for the individual. That to be a witness means not just, strictly speaking, seeing, but means seeing and being willing to do something about it. That's what our faith calls us to do. It calls us to have our eyes open and see the suffering. It also calls us to do something about it. And each week as we go out into the world, we go out with new eyes, ready to read the newspaper, ready to go to work, whether ready to go to school, whether ready to go into whatever callings that you are called in the world, with open eyes, ready to be a witness, to speak out, to speak to faith and to justice, and especially to hope, in a world that needs a cloud of witnesses so much. Go and do likewise. Amen.